Hello, and welcome to Beyond Bereavement, The Power of Planning. My name is Beatrice Tony Bailey, and I am your television host and the author of the book, Farewell, My Friend. Farewell, My Friend was written as a result of the many lessons I learned while taking care of my late husband. I found out during this very stressful time that it's not a matter of if a person's going to have to deal with these end-of-life issues, but when and who. Beyond Bereavement, The Power of Planning is a collaborative effort between the Interfaith Service Bureau and its television station, RCC TV, and Eastline Memorial Park. It's the desire of these organizations that Beyond Bereavement, The Power of Planning function as a platform for interactive discussions between the various faith communities. Won't you join us? And welcome to Beyond Bereavement, The Power of Planning. I am Beatrice Bailey, your television host. I know I always say that this is one of my favorite episodes, but it really is going to be one of my favorite episodes. It's about organization, clutter control, and it's just one of my things. I'm a self-professed neatnik. I'm not OCD, but I'm probably bordering on OCD. I like organization. It seems like when things are out of place, they have little voices that say, "Bea, I'm over here, put me away." I have issues, and I profess I have issues. But even when I was a little child, and I was little, I'm 6 foot, but I really was little at one time in my life, my older sister told me I used to like to organize my toys. And I can remember my ex-husband said once to me, which was kind of funny, he says, my idea of a fun evening would be cleaning out the garage. So he is my ex-husband, but that's a whole nother episode. But anyway, I love containers. When I used to work for Xerox Corporation and my different sales reps would take me to a bookstore, they would say, don't take her to a bookstore, there's containers there. Because I love it. Places like Organize It or the Container Store, that would be nirvana for me. So at any rate, I blame my mother for all of this because it's always your mother's fault. I'm sure it was severe toilet training as a child that made me who I am today. When in doubt, just blame your mother. But what happened is that this tendency for organization has always served me well in almost every area of my life, particularly when I was taking care of my late husband. Had never been a caregiver before, but I knew how to organize all things around me, and that's exactly what I did. Now, it's a natural for me through severe something as a child, but it's not so natural for other people. And I look around and I wonder, what is going on in America? You have people who are living in these $1 million homes, or they used to be worth $1 million homes, 3-car garage, and their cars are in the driveway because the garage is filled with so much clutter. I was fortunate enough to go to China in 2007. Wonderful trips. I went to Hong Kong for about 4 days, and then the People's Republic of China. Now, there's a lot of people in China, awful lot of people in China. So as a result, it's not unusual for a family to live in 600 square feet. I mean, we would be hysterical if we had to live under those kind of circumstances. But as a result, that whole culture is a culture of minimalists. They don't have a lot of extra stuff. They don't have their 3 collection of giant snowman heads, you know, that they're going to use, or 3 or 4 different versions of Christmas decorations, and the big tree. They don't have the space. So it really is, it gives me pause when I look at the kind of madness that we have to deal with. And regardless of your culture or your faith, clutter control is something that we have to deal with in our busy lives. So I am beyond tickled to have 2 clutter control experts in my, it's not really a studio, this is my living room, and it's really a living room, so it's not really a studio. But they're here. We have Lisa Smith-Youngs. We're talking about how many names you get. I call her Lisa Smith-Youngs, McGillicuddy, Johnson Brown. So this is who's here. And she's a representative of Eschaton, which is a wonderful organization, a senior citizens complex, really la-di-da, and lots of amenities. And we have Miss Vandervoort, Barbara Vandervoort, and she has a special business she's with, is with senior relocation. You suddenly have a 4-bedroom house, now you're going to relocate to Eschaton. What are you going to do with your stuff? So, ladies, take it away. Lisa, tell me, what's our deal? What's our deal with the American Opera stuff?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like you, Bea, I've traveled around the world and I've seen that people in other countries live typically in much smaller spaces than we do. And there are some differences just culturally about how we accumulate things. For instance, we have big kitchens in America, don't we?
Yes. And we even cook in them sometimes.
And to go with those big kitchens, we have big grocery stores. And we go and we make our trip, once a week generally to get all of our groceries, right? But in other countries, you really shop on a daily basis. You don't need a great big refrigerator. And how often do we say, I need to clean out the refrigerator, right? In other countries, people have a refrigerator that's not much taller than your table here.
Wow.
You know, and they are shopping for fresh food. So really, in many ways, they're living a lot more healthfully than by the American standard. And that's just a small little example of how we've gotten very grandiose about our stuff. But you know, really when you think about it, this is something that goes way back in our gene pool. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. We were designed to be hunter-gatherers. That's what we are. And we still are to this day.
So
we're hunting for bargains.
So I could
right?
justify going to the rack, right?
Exactly.
I have a girlfriend whose husband used to she would always get these sales, and she says, "Oh, I've saved so much money." He says, "I can't afford you saving me so much money."
It's true. And we're gathering things. And that it's because it's in our genes to do this. And I'm not an expert about anthropology, but it just seems to me like we're just kind of taking what used to be going out and hunting for food and gathering, vegetables or herbs or whatever it might be, and we've taken it into this century, right? And so now we gather things and we surround ourselves with these things because those things tell us and other people who we are. For instance,
That could be scary.
You've got a tea set right here.
I do, with no tea in it.
Do you like tea?
Love tea.
I have 87 teapots at home.
Oh my dear.
Yeah.
That's another episode by itself.
About that later, yeah.
87. Why?
And this is something I go out and talk about in our classes that we do. Now, I'm with the Senior Connection, which is the community services arm of Eschaton. So really, most of the time, I'm out talking to the general public. I'm not necessarily in an Eschaton community. But one of the things that we talk about in those classes is, what do you collect? Do you collect anything?
You know, I collect, what do I collect? I'm starting to collect plates. Whenever I go to a foreign country, I'll bring back a plate because that's the only thing and jewelry.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. And those things take space in our homes,
Right.
don't they? And one of the most common causes of clutter is that we don't make a particular space for these things that we collect. And it doesn't have to be things that we collect that are decorative. It could be things we collect just out of habit. For instance, receipts. We collect receipts, don't we? When you go through a drive-through at a fast food, they hand you the receipt. Do you ever tell them, oh, no, keep the receipt? No, we take the receipt, we put it in our purse, and our purse becomes nothing but collection. So it starts small with these little bits and then eventually leads up into the home where we can see, in many cases, a lot of clutter. And unlike you, I'm not an organizing freak. I'm not a professional organizer. I actually started teaching these classes because we were receiving calls at the Senior Connection from family members of older adults who need to help their parents pare down, or their grandparents, and sometimes just the older adults themselves saying, I realize that I've just got too much to deal with here and I need to figure out how to pare down.
I want to get back to your 87 teapots. I do. What, I mean, Lisa, physician, heal thyself.
Yeah.
What do you have them on display?
And that's often a question asked in my class is, what do you do with 87 teapots? Well, in order to keep it from being clutter, because if you have 87 and they're out all the time, people are going to talk, aren't
Right.
they?
Oh,
or
yeah.
they're going to say, are you ever going to serve me some tea? So what I did was I took my collection and I divided it into 4 seasons. So I have the winter teapots and the summer teapots and the fall teapots and the spring teapots. And when it's not in season, those teapots are stored away.
Okay.
And then
You've got
I have
control over
actually
it.
a 5th collection of teapots.
Oh, child.
And that's the teapots that I'd prefer not to have. But this is what happens when people hear that you collect something. What do?
Oh, they give you stuff.
Yes, and that's going to start happening now that you've said this on television. People are going to start sending you plates, Bea.
No, it's okay. I want no plates. Well, maybe.
Do you drink tea?
Me? Oh, yes, I love tea, and that's
Okay.
really how it started.
Right.
As I had a fascination with learning about tea, and then it became teapots. But that fifth collection are the teapots you can't throw away because somebody gave it to you, and you might have to bring it out at some point or another. But it's not really a teapot that says anything about me. You know, it doesn't say anything about me other than I like you enough to keep the teapot.
You know what? And it's interesting because my adult children now are in a position in their lives financially that they can buy me things. You know, when they're growing up, you know, they'd make me things. You know, how many little clay fists can you have? But I've got them all. I've saved them all. But they like to buy me things. But again, since I'm trying to pare down, I've told them, don't give me anything that I have to dust. I don't care what you give me. So they'll give me services for massage. You know, you can always give me jewelry. But I mean, don't give me anything. I don't want the little trinket thingies. Don't do that. So it's difficult when suddenly you have children that are in a position that want to do things for their mother or their grandmother.
It's really a very valid point that you're making, particularly with regard to older adults, because we need to start thinking that way when somebody is starting into that point in their life where they want to pare down and downsize and be thoughtful about our gift giving. First of all, the most important gift is the gift of your time. And a lot of us in this crazy technological world are moving so fast that we forget that we need to stop sometimes and just spend some time with somebody. And time can be productive time too. And I talk about that in the classes, that you can, if you've made a date with yourself to declutter, and your friend calls or one of your kids calls and you haven't seen each other in a month and they say, let's go out to lunch today, instead of saying, yes, let's go out to lunch, say, tell you what, bring lunch over and we will go through my closet together. And it's actually quite a bit of fun when you have help to go through your closet.
Wouldn't there be battles though? I gotta keep my poodle skirt.
Yes, there are battles, but they're fun battles. They really are. My best friend comes over to help me, and she is like you. She is a neatnik, and she loves everything in its place. And so when I take out the prom dress from 1982, and I say, oh, I remember this, and he was such a sweet boy that I was dating at the time, and took me out to dinner, and we went to the dance, and she'll say that the dress didn't even look good on you in 82, sweetheart. Out it goes.
Oh, she's hardcore.
But
I think you need a friend like that. You don't need
do.
someone that has of your same ilk. When I get ready to do it, I'll have my BFF, which is Ruth Kermel. I'm almost afraid to have her come over. One day she said, well, Bea, how many pairs of slacks do you have? I probably have 10. Well, I stopped counting at 30.
Yeah.
And I thought, ooh, she can't come over. She can't come over.
I take advantage of that, you know, and I know that I will do a much better job cleaning out my closet with somebody there who's not emotionally invested in those clothes, you know. It works. It works really well.
That's funny. What would you like? But you also said a little trick that you used in the closet about hangers or something?
That's Barbara.
Is that Barbara? Okay, Barbara, tell us, first of all, introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
I'm Barbara Vandervoort, and I am a senior move manager with Senior Relocation Services. We are a full service moving company. We can move you across the street or across the world. So we're not in a box, for lack of a better term.
Very good. Now, how long have this business been in existence?
It's fairly new. We started this entity in June of this year. Prior to that, we had started the moving services with Eschaton, and on that we had I think it was six and a half years. And prior to that, I had worked for Eschaton for almost 18.
Okay.
And prior to that, I have a lot of senior experience. So seniors are my niche. I don't do babysitting, but
it's a unique group. And again, with the aging of America, these are issues that we really have to address. I have a girlfriend that I like to travel with, and she has beautiful things. She collects all kinds of priceless, you know, Chinese, Japanese artifacts and whatever. And she tells her kids when they come to visit, don't put that on the 50-cent table. Don't put that on the 50-cent table, because our stuff, our wonderful treasures, is just really a bunch of stuff to our kids. And so I would challenge everyone to look around your house. I mean, do you really need the whatever? Because your kids aren't going to value that. Stuff that they value, you already know. They want the painting, they want whatever, whatever. Not that you're going to kick the bucket because we're beyond bereavement. But again, you want to do them a favor and not leave them a gigantic mess and trying to figure out what to do with your 87 teapots.
I have to take exception with that
Uh-oh.
in one area, though, B, and that it's a story I love to tell during the class because everybody can relate to this. And it's when my mother, who will be 82 on Christmas Day
wonderful.
this year, moved into her new home. She was moving from a 1,600 square foot house into an 1,100 square foot cottage. And she started downsizing her home the day we poured the foundation for her new cottage. And it took 2 years to build the cottage, and it took 2 years for her to pare everything down. And it gave her the time to do it without a lot of headache. You know, she was able to really think things through and take the time to sort and to transition things. We talk a lot about transitioning and how we don't want to fill up the landfill with a lot of trash anymore, and how can we transition things to new homes where they would be useful. And when she was doing this, she would call me, and I have 2 sisters, and she'd say, I'm working on the kitchen now. Is there anything that you'd like? And I've lived away from home for over 25 years, and I said, oh, Mom, I have all my own kitchen stuff, but now that you mention it, there is something I'd like, and that's the stuffing pot. And she said, the stuffing pot? Well, you have to understand, my mother's stuffing pot looks like it was used in World War II. It's an old pot. They received it when they were married in 1946, and it's just been everywhere with them that they've ever lived, and it's missing a handle on one side. But it's a nice pot as far as making stuffing because it has a really thick bottom that doesn't burn the stuffing. On top of that, for me, emotionally, the stuffing pot is sort of a talisman. It has power because the best stuffing ever made in the world has always been made in that pot by my mother, right? So for me, that stuffing pot, which might seem like junk to somebody else, is really infused with a great deal of emotion and meaning. So did I get the stuffing pot? Well, I have 2 sisters. When she asked my 2 sisters, who are both older than me, would you like something from the kitchen? They both said, no, I can't really think of it. Oh, by the way, there is that stuffing pot.
Really? Who got the pot?
I got the pot.
All right, right on, Lisa.
Right? But, I mean, it's amazing because when you look around your house, you may think that to your children things have no meaning. And some of those things are going to be the more expensive items, the cherry wood furniture or the baby grand piano. And they may say, I don't want those things. And then there'll be some strange thing that you'll be shocked that they want.
Well, it gets back to the theme of the show, and certainly the theme of my book, Farewell, My Friend, is the power of planning. You wouldn't be able to address these issues unless you had a discussion, an active discussion about it. And you can't do it, when Mom is, is getting ready to receive a tap on her shoulder. Everybody's too emotional. But take the time to look around and have these discussions early on, and it can be fun. The bantering back and forth between the sisters. But I put my money on you. I'd be surprised if you didn't get the stuffing pot.
Well, you haven't met Tony,
Okay.
so we'll do that some other time. But interestingly enough, when you mentioned that about having that conversation, one of the things that I teach in the classes is that now is the time to declutter and to downsize, not 3 months from now, not 3 years from now. Why? Because you want to make sure you're doing it when you're doing it with a clear mind. And if you are dealing with a crisis, like a pending emotional event, or like
Probably
having
death is a pending emotional event. Yes.
or having to leave your home that
Yes.
you've been in for 40 years, right?
Which is another kind of
Or
loss.
if you've been severely ill or had a stroke. You don't want to have to make those decisions when you're coping with all this other chaos. You want to do it when you don't have a lot of other things to think about. And that's the best time to look at your household and say, what can I live with and what can I live without? My mother and I used to do this. We used to go to yard sales together, and as I've gotten older, I've realized all I'm doing is cluttering up my home with other people's things.
That they were trying
And
to get rid of.
So now we have the same. If we go to a yard sale, she'll say, do you see anything that you can't live without? And I say, I don't see anything I can live with.
Right.
Which it's not a judgment on what's being sold or given away, but more on, do I really need this thing in my home? Do I need to bring another item into my home? And that's part of the battle of dealing with clutter, is not allowing things in that you don't really need.
Well, and if you bring something in, you have to take something out.
Exactly.
Well, with that headset, now, what about your collection of teapots that you don't like?
The ones that I don't like, well, it's not very large, I have to admit. I did pretty well at paring down, but I keep them around to honor those people.
Okay.
And they're not in the house when I don't need them. And that's part of understanding what you have. I remember a lady came to see me after a class crying. And that happens quite frequently after I teach a class. Someone will come up and they'll have tears in their eyes.
We're attached to our stuff. Our stuff is our stuff.
Yes.
It's almost like arteries or heart, you know.
And she said, I have 7 trunks at home full of handmade linens. And she was from Mexico, and they were linens that had been made by her grandmother and her great-grandmother. And she said, my children don't want them, and I don't know what to do, and I can't stand the thought of parting with them. And I said, you need to take those 7 and make it 1. And what's in the other 6 need to do things that serve the memory of your grandmother and your great-grandmother. Tell me about those women. And so she talked about how in their family, the older women always took care of the babies. And I said, well, why don't you transition these linens to the care of small children who don't have people who care about them in their family?
Wonderful, wonderful.
And more tears, because she thought, yes, that's what serves the memory of those people and the beautiful linens that they made. And I can imagine those little babies swaddled in these beautiful, blankets and crocheted items, and thinking, it's an honor to be able to give things that have meant something to you to people that they will mean much more to.
It's wonderful, wonderful. Barbara, what'd you like to add? Jump in here.
Well, speaking of mothers, one of my harder moves was moving my mother. And we actually started about 6 months before she was going to move, and had a large 5-bedroom house going to a 2-bedroom apartment in a community. And it's easy for me to say, well, I'm a third party disinterested with my other clients, but with my mom, I'm like the one. And we knew all the pieces that were going to all the kids and everything. And so my thing is, if you give it to somebody who has nothing or would really need it, that gives you that peace and that calm. If it's a piece that you absolutely, cherished, but you can't take it, we've often made like photo albums. We've taken pictures, but I remind people that it's not the thing; it's the memory the thing gives you, and talking about that memory and bringing that up. That is an inanimate object, but the memories and the joy and the happiness or the sorrow or whatever that makes you think about that in such a special way, it really impacts you that way. So God love her, it was a slippery slope. She was giving away things right and left, right and left. I'm going, whoa, Mom, settle down. And it's funny because she would cook for, all of us, all the kids, all the grandkids and everything. And now she doesn't cook at all because she didn't want to. She'll heat herself up something, or she'll go to the dining room and she's just as happy. But it takes a huge weight off of you when you have those things that they almost inundate you with the guilt of getting rid of it. Like a teapot serves a memory for her. I mean, just to let you know, I don't collect anything. Although I collect memories and friends and loved ones, and those are things that are tangible to me. And it might sound corny, but it really is. When that thing breaks, it's gone. But what the memory is not. And that's something that I really try to strive with my clients is, it's okay, and it's unfortunate that our lives are so busy and crazy, and we don't put out the china, and we don't court each other, and but it is what it is. And kids are really settled in their lives, and they don't need another set of china, and they don't need it.
And they don't entertain that way anymore.
They don't.
I have, I'm not a china kind of girl. Either I have another person over, or a total of 2 couples over, or have 30 people over. Now, what am I going to do with china?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not a china. I mean, I have nice serving stuff, but I'm not a china kind of girl. Well, I'm not a girl. When I was a girl, Chicago was a cow pasture, but that's neither here nor there. But it's just you've got to look at the individual lifestyle, and it's tough. But again, back to our mantra is that you've got to take the time to be organized. Last weekend, I mean, I was in my robe all day on Saturday, which is like unheard of for me. But I just needed that time just to putter and to get things organized, because it is stressful, particularly if you're a fairly organized person like I am, and you have disarray around you. It makes me nervous. Clutter just makes me nervous. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect like my living room here, but I mean, it has to have a certain amount of organization, or it's noise. To me, it's visual and mental noise. And my children are very, very organized, but I do believe that if you start children out very young being organized, that's the way they're going to view life. That's the way that they're going to view an assignment. They already know. If they come from an organized household, they then know there's these things need to be done decently and in order. And that if, I mean, my daughter's more anal than I am, which is pretty bad, and my son is pretty organized as well. But my mother was more organized than I was. I mean, she had certain days that she did the laundry. She washed her windows every week. I mean, the fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree, nor does it roll. But again, that's the way that we approach a project. And what people have to do, you've got to take time to organize on a daily basis. I mean, because it'll get away from you. I mean, it's real easy to let that go and let that go. Then suddenly you've got an overwhelming mess, and you don't know where to start.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we do talk about that in these classes. And, people sometimes ask, why does Eschaton, why does the Senior Connection do classes on clutter? Why is that related to older adults? And Barbara had mentioned it earlier in an aside that it's a safety issue in the home. If your home is cluttered, it becomes a fall hazard. It also impedes you from being able to move around the home if you have walking devices like a walker or a cane. You are putting yourself at risk, and the number one issue of decline with older adults, it starts when they break a hip.
See, and I read an article about that, that like 70% of the women that break a hip over the age of, I think, 60 or 65, they die. And so I was talking to my chiropractor, I said, they die. I said, why? Because a lot of them don't work out, they lack upper body strength, they get pneumonia. And they can't move around enough to
The reason that they get pneumonia is because after they've broken the hip and they're in the hospital, they're on their back. And so it starts to fill up the lungs. And because they aren't able to get up and move around, they're not able to normally metabolize everything that's happening in the body. And so pneumonia is often a secondary issue to breaking a hip. So let's start by keeping the house clear. But you had mentioned scheduling or your time. And I was thinking scheduling because I tell people schedule the time to do this in your home. And it doesn't mean that you have to plan a whole week of decluttering your house or a whole Saturday. First of all, as we get older, our stamina isn't what it was when we were younger.
My stamina's pretty good. I'd be hanging.
But, for you, it's not an issue. But for somebody who's 87, spending a whole day picking up boxes and carrying and lifting can lead to a whole next day of having to be in bed taking medicine.
Or even thinking about doing that could tire them out.
That's true.
And that's why they don't do it.
And so if you schedule the amount of time that you're physically able to do something, for instance, let's say you have rheumatoid arthritis and all your shoes are on the floor of your closet, then schedule 20 minutes. If that's the most amount of time you can really plan to be down on your knees in the closet, schedule 20 minutes, do what you can in 20, and then schedule another 20 minutes tomorrow. It doesn't have to be a whole day or a whole week or a whole month of organizing. If you do little bits in manageable time, then you'll have less fallout from it physically.
Literally and figuratively.
And you'll stay on top of it.
But also would be a good project, like if you have grandchildren, my grandsons want to always earn money and whatever, why not come over and spend a day with Nana? or Mimi as they call me, and we can incorporate that into the day as well.
It's also part of honoring who you are. When Barbara was talking about taking pictures of those things so you can remember them, I talk about that in my classes, honoring your life when you are transitioning these things out of your life. You had mentioned Christmas decorations and how we have multiple sets. My mother's an artist. I did not grow up in an organized home. I grew up in an artist's home where chaos was just an excuse for creativity, right? My mother, when she left her home of 30 years, had 7 different Christmas decoration sets. She has 6 grandchildren. She had each grandchild come and spend a weekend over that 2 years and pick a Christmas set to take with them.
Wonderful.
And they would get them out, they would make Christmas cookies, they would talk about the memories the child have of Christmas at Grandma's house, and then they would leave with those Christmas decorations.
That's wonderful.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
I thought that was very creative, you know?
Well, and the memories are what they're making.
Exactly.
You know, again, it doesn't go to the thing, it goes to the memory. And that, to me, is just the biggest part of it.
I think it's key because we think about our loved ones. You think about your loved ones, at least I do. Do you remember the thing that you got from them? I really don't. I can think of tender moments or there are a lot of funny people in my family or funny things that we did. I don't remember the skirt. I don't remember the whatever. But I remember making cookies. I can remember one of the most tender things that my father did because I was always a baker. I was a baker and very studious and all that. And so I can remember, this is a true story, my father came in and I baked the cake, but I didn't want to do chocolate frosting or pink. I would do like chartreuse and purple frosting or whatever. So he came in and he looked at the cake that I had made and he said, "Baby, what is on the top of the cake?" I said, "Well, I went and got," and I was probably about 10, it was a very formidable age. I said, "I went and got the striped toothpaste, which was that was candy stripe, which was red and white, and I did the swirl just like Betty Crocker did on TV." And he looked at me, he said, "Sweetie, that is a pastry cuff, and there's icing inside there." Now he could have said, "You big dummy." He says, "Tell you what, go in the cupboard and get some of your mother's strawberry preserves. Let's put that on top." So he carefully scraped off the top of the cake, put the strawberry preserves on. He says, "I want to have the very first piece." And my father sat there, cut into that cake, and ate that. Now, I'm over 40, way over 40, but that's one of the most tender memories that I had about my father. And it wasn't necessarily the Bible he gave me or the watch he gave me. It was that particular situation when he really gave me encouragement as a young woman and certainly a young cook. And I'm a confident cook today, I think, because of that particular incident. So that's far more important.
I was just thinking it's a really sweet story to hear. And you go on giving the gift that your dad gave you by telling that story. And it made me think about the many times when I've been out with this class, teaching this class, and people talk to me about their memories with their families. And they ask about pictures. And pictures are an important thing, I think. And I don't consider pictures clutter, even when there are a lot of them. Part of that because I'm a family historian myself. And it's difficult to part with pictures or items like a family Bible. And we talk about this a lot because some people are really inundated with a great many pictures. And if they're able to actually make the transition to doing things digitally onto a computer, then I will recommend doing that. And there are services where you can hire a company to come in. They have a special type of scanner that you can put like 30 photographs through in about 2 minutes. And it'll scan all of them and put them on a digital album. And then you have them that way. But oftentimes I recommend that they transition those things to like a family history center. Where those things will be taken care of. The photographs will be kept protected from the light. And other people who are researching their family history will have access to those things. And it's really a far better thing you do for the memory of your ancestors and your family to donate those things than to keep them hidden away in a box under your bed.
Well, that's important because I usually, about once a year, every other year, I take my photographs because I keep them in a little box. And then I have, I think, 23, 24 chronological photo albums you know, that I put things into, but I haven't done the digital thing. But interesting, what is important is that one time there was a kitchen fire that we had in the house, and my son had caused the kitchen fire. And so the kitchen was a grease fire. And the very first thing he thought of, he ran outside, threw the dog over the fence, then ran and grabbed the photo albums. Because when my kids would come in from college, they would invariably get out the photo albums and go through, you know, the photo albums. So again, but it's clutter. I know people that have boxes of photographs without the date on it, whatever, and that transitions. That's overwhelming. If your kids inherit that, I mean, it's overwhelming, and there's guilt. I don't want to get rid of the photographs, but you don't know what they are. So again, it's just taking the time. And I usually do a lot of purging at the end of the year, particularly my filing system. I don't keep my receipts more than a year. Are there suggestions you have regarding what we need to do on an annual basis?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when I started doing this class, it was just about stuff, and the class is called What Do I Do with All This Stuff? I started getting requests from people attending the class to ask me to do a class just on paper. So now I also do a sequel class called What Do I Do with All This Paper? And I'm working on one now about treasure, those real precious things that we have trouble parting with because they have significant value, either emotionally or financially. In the paper class, I talk about dealing with paper as it comes in. And also at the end of the class, we talk about a filing system for your paper.
Now, how do you deal with the paper that comes in?
It's called a shredder.
I've heard of that.
It's a tremendous invention. And we talk about when the paper comes in the house, when you're picking up your mail at the end of your day, or for some people, they deal with their mail first thing in the morning, take it to a garbage can immediately and sort it by the garbage.
Or the recycle bin.
Yes. And in our house, it is a recycle bin. Right. There is no garbage can. But you want to, the things that are sensitive, that are clutter, for instance, how many times now do you get offers for mortgage on your house, and it has the value of your current mortgage right on there? How do they get that information, right? I don't want that going into the trash or to the recycle bin. I put that through a shredder. So I recommend that people just sort their mail right there by the garbage or recycling bin or the shredder, and take care of it as it comes in. Now, I know I'm strange this way, but
we love you.
I like junk mail. I like to look at the ads.
That's a whole other issue.
Oh my God.
Whole other episode.
I love to look at it, right? But I know that I might not get to it. And so if I leave it on the coffee table, it's clutter, right? So I have a recycling bin, one of those triple ones that you sort things, and it goes into the recycling bin. And then if I have time, I know that I can go and pull it from the recycling bin and look at it before trash day, right? And that's how I deal with that.
But at least you have it contained. Yeah. I take a lot of the stuff I'm going to read, like my AAA magazine and all the stuff there's good articles in there, but I don't always get to it. I'll take it to the beauty shop. You know, I'll take it to the airport. My magazine's to the airport, because you get there 2 hours early. What are you going to do? I take that, read that stuff, shred what I need to shred, and toss it. And by that same token, I used to get weekly magazines. Can't do it. It's too stressful. It's absolutely, because I'm so busy, I can't get to that magazine on a weekly basis. But you don't want to throw it away because you haven't read it. So what I stopped doing is getting any kind of magazine. If I want to find out what the latest thing that's happening to Brangelina, you know, I'll go by the people at the grocery store, and then I won't have. For me, it's pressure having that coming in, but that's just me.
And oftentimes, you know, people will say to me, "But the library won't take my used magazines, or the doctor's office doesn't want my used magazines," and I ask them to think outside of the box, because I know who can use those things. Senior centers can use those things because seniors are on tight budgets, and oftentimes, especially seniors who utilize their senior center, are on fixed incomes, and so it is a very big treat for them to go to the senior center and see the latest Home and Garden magazine, or see the latest Smithsonian magazine, or even Via, the magazine from 3A. Also, adult daycare centers use those magazines for crafts, and they love to have them. They're on very tight budgets. So things that you think, another thing is yarn. People will call our office and say, I have 15 grocery bags full of yarn I never used. And we know senior groups that make blankets for receiving blankets for babies, and so they love to get that free yarn. So those things can be transitioned more easily than people anticipate, and they can always just call us at the Senior Connection and ask for our help in
And what's the number?
brainstorming.
What's the number of the Senior Connection?
It's toll-free, 888-334-3490.
Great. Now, Barbara, you were mentioning when we were getting ready for this episode about a little trick that you have people use with their wardrobe as far as their hangers are concerned. Tell us about that.
Well,
Don't tell me about it because
because you won't listen.
I've got issues, but that's a whole other thing.
It's just a fun thing. When you're putting clean clothes back in the closet, if you turn the hanger either facing you or whichever way, and after a week or a month, you can see the ones that haven't been even touched. It kind of reiterates the fact that you probably aren't wearing that, at least in the month that you've done this little test, and you probably don't wear it or won't wear it. And there's a rule, it's the 20-80 rule, that 20% of the things in our house are used, worn, eaten, whatever. 80% are not. And I've moved so many people that I'll be cleaning out a cupboard and they go, oh, I forgot I had that. Oh, I didn't know I had that. We found a lady had this brick of foil in her closet, way tucked back. It was $8,700, and she forgot she had it.
What kind of foil?
It was just wrapped in foil. Probably put it there for safekeeping, and we could have had a heck of a good time in Tahoe or something. But
Right.
So. When, like Lisa was saying, you don't want it to get to a point of no return, or you're in the hospital and your kids are put in charge of, I've got to move mom today. Well, doing it now, doing my mom's move, she kept saying, do you kids know how fortunate you are that you don't have to go through this when I die? And I kept going, well, thank you, Mother, thank you. I can cross that off my list, So it can be a fun thing. It doesn't have to be a horrible, it's not the end of your life. I've moved several people that it's a life-changing transition for them because their life gets better. They're not in this little hovel in their house alone waiting for their son or daughter or niece or nephew to call. They're in with people their own age, they're interacting, they're eating better, so their health gets better. And it's amazing. It's a transformation that I said, please just give it a little time, let the dust settle, because every place they're going to, the people around them have already been through that. So they take them under their wing and get them through it. So it doesn't have to be a horrible, in the olden days, going to a home, used to be a death sentence, and it's not that at all.
Have you toured some of these living arrangement, the senior
community?
My goodness! There's one I went to. They have happy hour. They got this. They got buses to Tahoe. So it's not the end of the road. Now we've talked about people who are clutterers. Well, there's a whole nother category called hoarders, and these are beyond pack rats. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Barbara and I, when we used to work together, came across some interesting situations. And, the thing I like to preface comments about hoarding, number one, is that it happens insidiously slowly. It doesn't happen overnight. It can happen to anybody. You don't have to have an obsessive compulsive personality to become a hoarder.
Just define to our audience what a hoarder is.
Well, that's interesting. I've never really thought about
someone who collects teapots.
Maybe 87 of them.
or like the junk mail coming in. They have to leave it in a pile, and those piles are their, connection to something. It
But
can be anything.
It's taken to an extreme.
Oh,
Yeah,
way over the top.
To an extreme.
To a dangerous extreme.
Yes.
Health-wise, environmental-wise, fire safety, everything,
People hoard anything. They can hoard thread. They can hoard pets. There are people that hoard pets.
Yes, you hear those stories.
One of the things that I see more frequently than anything else is plastic bags, and it's hoarding. It's not responsible anymore. It's gone beyond responsibility, social responsibility, to actual hoarding. Those little trays that come underneath meat in the grocery store. That one it's just a standard. You
And
see it everywhere.
Cottage cheese containers.
Yeah. You only need so many of them,
Right.
right? And so when you get beyond the so many, then you start thinking, is this hoarding?
And sometimes it's a result of traumas in a childhood, and they're afraid of losing control. I'm not an expert in that, but it's something that I found curious enough to check it out on the internet. So if you're interested, check it out on the internet, because it is you read stories every now and then where houses are condemned.
Yes.
Because, and I think what you're going to see, we were able to get some photographs, and what you're seeing right now are samples of before and after pictures of hoarding incidents, whereby these people were really out of control. And Lisa told me these were the nicer pictures that they could show. So what have been some of the situations that you're aware of hoarding?
Well, I did recently, well, not that recently, but several months ago, a county officer did a presentation on hoarding in Sacramento County, and he showed pictures where the rats had become so unafraid of people that they were almost posing for the pictures because of the hoarding that had been going on in that house.
Were there people living in the house?
Yeah, and there is a special department in Sacramento County that deals with these things, and I can't tell you what that is right now, but they go out and they deal with some of these situations, and oftentimes they'll call the senior connection because they want this person, after they've removed all this clutter, to have some connection with the community. And so our telephone reassurance program takes that person under their wing and makes calls to their home just to keep them in touch with somebody on the outside, because oftentimes these people will be folks who are isolated and things have gotten out of control because there's nobody to come in and say, oh my goodness, Mom, we need to catch up on these things, or you really don't need to save that much of this or that. Barbara, I remember once taking care of a situation, had to move somebody to Southern California, and was told that there were many important things that had to be moved. And when she got to the house, it was paper. And it was paper that really had no meaning. But the paper that did have meaning, like your Social Security card or your insurance paper,
Right.
was cluttered up with all the paper that didn't have meaning, all those mailers that come, all the junk mail. So all of it became meaningful because you didn't know where the meaningful things were.
So what do you do? Have a giant, you just sort through it.
Yeah, you just set up. I give them homework. It depends on their level of being able to handle something, first of all, and we visit, we talk, and then after finding that out, then I'll give them homework and say, you start in the office today and give yourself 4 days to do it, depending on the time frame and everything. If they start in one corner of the room and use the room as a form of getting them through, then they touch everything one time and they make a decision. They have a keep pile, they have a donate pile, and they have trash. And some of them can really manage it and get through it. Otherwise, I can have them sit in a chair and I'll do it for them, go around the room. And it really is amazing how quickly you can go through and complete it and set obtainable goals so that you can get it completed and be ready for that transition, because you don't want to pay to move something you don't need, you don't
Right.
wear, and you want to simplify your life. And especially going into some of these communities, a lot of things are provided for them, meals, transportation. So whatever they're doing in their house now, they'll do that or less because they won't have to. They'll
Right.
socialize. If they want to have a get together with their family, they don't have to take 4 sets of china and try to entertain in this little place. They can order the kitchen to make the dining room section for their family, or they can make arrangements. We have contracts with hotels, and they have special room rates for people who are visiting that residence. So there's so many different ways of doing things that can keep it all in perspective for them.
You know what, and it's interesting, and when you're saying that, what I was hearing is that during the twilight of these people's years, they're not spending all their time messing with their stuff.
Nope.
They're creating new memories and being able to spend quality time with their family and not being harnessed to all of their stuff.
That's
Or
right.
they can't remember.
Right.
You know, and that gets into another subject as
Right.
well. So the hoarding, like we were talking about, does come in a slower stage, but it can go, you know, tenfold. Or it can be kind of simple, you know, don't move mom's stuff. You know, I had a client once, her daughter had one side of the kitchen table and she had the other, and all the piles, they were both hoarders to a certain extent. And so I had to pack every pile in a Ziploc bag and write where it was on the table and what it was in it. And that's how I packed it. And when we unpacked it, I placed everything. I mean, so it can be, you know, a simple client who doesn't want anything in the house but his toothbrush and his pillow, and we have to sell everything and get rid of everything, to the totally opposite extreme where you're having to label things and reassure them, you know, quite often that, you know, that it is there, I promise it's going to be there, and, you know, it could just be junk mail.
Barbara is great, I have to tell you, because she helped me move out of my office when I moved from one office to another. And she is very good at making it quick and efficient. And she did work with me around the room, because I would come across work that I was in the middle of doing, and I'd stop to do the work instead of moving. Mm-hmm. And Barbara would say, no, 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 we're just going to label what that work was, and we're going to put it in this bag, and we're going to move it, and we're going to put it in the same place in your new office. Mm-hmm. And it worked.
You know, it's important. We all have our different little tricks. When I was working as a manager for the state, there was so much to do. I mean, just so much to do, and all these different piles. At the end of each week, I would just put a label, just an 8.5 by 11 label, on top of the piles. Mm-hmm. You know, so it wasn't just a whole bunch of junk. It was like 5 or 6 piles of identified information. When my children were younger, and you know, we didn't have the computer in the home and things like that, because it was a long time ago. But what I would do is I had plastic bins, and I'm one of those people, I love the dollar store. Dollar store, I mean, because it has containers there. But I had like plastic bins that I had towards the entryway. So when the kids would come in, they knew if there was a parent permission slip that I had to fill out, or something, or they needed money or whatever, I would check the bin. And their responsibility was to put it in the bin, and my responsibility to do my part of the bin, whether it was lunches or whatever, or clean gym clothes or whatever. It became very, very simple. There wasn't the, I don't have the whatever. You know what? You didn't give me the whatever, or check the bin. It just really cut out a lot of noise in the morning.
And that got them ready for the workforce. Mm-hmm. When they have an inbox.
Right, mm-hmm. Exactly. And both of them are really very efficient.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Other comments?
You know, you made me think about something else with regard to sorting, and that I teach this during the paper clutter class. When you sit down with a pile, we like to call them the piles. Mm-hmm. I have 5 piles, right? And I use the 80-20 rule. 80% has to go, 20% can stay. And a person starts sorting through that pile, they come across things that take them away from the task at hand. And it happens to me all the time. So I tell them to get a notepad and a pencil. And as you come across, oh, my dentist appointment is next week, I need to change that appointment. Instead of stopping your sorting, you make a note, call dentist's office to change appointment, and you set it aside in the proper pile.
To keep you
and
focused.
You keep sorting, and you don't stop. And I always tell them, it's like a battle. If you stop in the middle of a battle, what happens? You get shot down.
Right.
Right? So you're going to stay engaged in the battle, make your notes, and keep moving. And you only give yourself up to 2 hours to sort at any given time. After 2 hours, you start to lose focus, and you're not effectively sorting. I personally never take more than an hour, because after an hour, I'm bored, and I don't want to think about it anymore.
Mm-hmm. What's a single bit of advice you give to someone that does tend to clutter? Which is to all of us, by the way.
Well, again, it depends on their level of understanding. You know, if there's deficits involved, a lot of times kids will want to give mom and dad the opportunity to make a decision when it's just too difficult for them to. And so being a third party, I can share that information. Or why don't you take mom to breakfast or have her nails done while we're in here pulling all of her lovely things out and putting them in a truck. You know, everyone's affected differently, but it's okay to let things go and just to hold the memories in your heart, in your head, and, you know, photos and things like that. But we don't need all the stuff. We really don't.
How about black shoes? I mean, how many? My husband.
You only
used
have
to
one
say,
pair of feet.
My husband used to say, how many pairs of black shoes can a woman have? Well, you got your dressy ones, you got your flats, you got the ones you wear with pants, the one you wear with jeans, you got the summer ones, you got the winter ones. And I went and I counted black shoes one time, because it's, how many pair of black shoes you have? I mean, like 25 pairs of black shoes. I mean, come on. But I like my black shoes.
Did any of them have dust on them?
Your Honor, on the on advice of my attorney, I will not answer that question.
B, I'd just like to say a good question to ask yourself, because people say this all the time when they're sorting or discarding, is I might need it someday. Mm-hmm. If you can't say when, you probably don't.
Oh, good point. Like
So
really cute pair of white shoes I've
I'm
never
going to
ever
need these.
worn.
When are you going to need them? Are you going to need them in 3 months? Are you going to need them for a specific event? If you can't answer with something reasonable, you really don't need it.
I'm going to be busy. really busy. Now, again, we talked about hoarding. Is there any advice you'd give a child that has to approach a parent? Because, I mean, suddenly as we get older, the roles and relationships change. I mean,
Well, again, it depends on what kind of understanding level they're at. If it's been a lifelong thing, it probably goes really deep into counseling and possibly a doctor or whatever. But getting them to see a doctor is a good place to start, and just taking it from there. Whatever the outcome of that is will determine, helping them.
I think also mention, as you mentioned before, the health concerns. If you're saying, Mom, I love you so much, Dad, I love you so much, with these 87 teapots that you have on the floor and the junk mail, and that I'm afraid that you're going to fall. Mm-hmm. And I love you too much for that to happen. So let me help you, and, and be sensitive, because their, in your opinion, their junk is their stuff, and we're all connected with our stuff. So you want to handle that, I would think, in a very tender manner.
Mm-hmm.
There's also support groups. There is one here in Sacramento, Clutterers Anonymous, that meets once a month. And you can call us at the Senior Connection for information on how to get to that. But I think sometimes people don't want to talk to a doctor. They'd rather talk to somebody else who has the same problem. Mm-hmm. And they feel more accepted in that format. So that may be another way to go.
Well, I guess the key we're saying here, it's very, very important for you to start somewhere. Start with a box. I mean, to be honest with yourself, and it's never too late to start something new. You want to visualize your life, in the months to come, and what can you do to eliminate the noise in your life? Now, we want to thank our wonderful guests, Miss Lisa Smith Youngs, McGillicuddy Johnson Brown, and Barbara Vandervoort. It really was very informative, and we really do appreciate it. Now, next week, the episode that we're going to have is called Memory, on Memory and Aging. It's a very, very exciting episode, but I don't remember what it's about. So tune in next week and help me remember what it's about. Thank you.